Joining us to talk about a Benghazi redo of sorts from the Center for Advanced Defense Studies, Colonel Tony Shaffer on the guest line. Colonel Shaffer, welcome back to WMAL. Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Happy New Year. Good to be on with you, Austin. Hope you're well.
Good to be with you, and all is well here at WMAL. Thank you very much.
Good.
I know you'll be appearing on Fox and Friends on the Fox News Channel coming up later this morning, but let's talk about this issue of the terrorist attacks in Benghazi, Libya. The New York Times news story. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't expect to see science fiction in a reputable newspaper such as the New York Times, and I think anyone who's been paying attention to the story this past week could recognize that there's not only glaring disconnects with the New York Times new narrative, it completely requires someone to essentially, to quote Hillary Clinton, suspend disbelief to be able to accept what's said. And notably in there, Austin, and I don't want to take, this is not a shot at Hillary Clinton, there's very little in there about her role and the role of the other State Department folks who have been scrutinized over the process and the investigations of trying to find out what happened. And I think the most disconcerting issue, and again, this is not a partisan issue, is the complete denial that Al-Qaeda had a role in the attack. And I've tried to explain this to people in the most succinct terms possible. Ansar al-Sharia, who was taking credit for the attack the night of the attack, as well as have been investigated by multiple agencies, our agencies, and found to have been the main driver of the attack, is Al-Qaeda. And it's one of those things where, and I try to explain it, if you go into Kmart, Kmart is a subsidiary of Sears, and you'll see Sears product in Kmart. So,
sure.
It's the same thing here. You're going to see, Al-Qaeda, Ansar al-Sharia is just rebranded Al-Qaeda, and the New York Times completely tries to explain that away as not even feasible.
Colonel Tony Shaffer, this seems to have aflamed the controversy in a whole new way. It would appear as though whatever the intentions in the New York Times may have been, it would appear as though they have backfired. I doubt that it was the intention of the New York Times to draw attention to the festering wound that is the Benghazi terrorist attacks and the murder of a U.S. ambassador and such. But that said, this would appear to be yet again a renewed problem for the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, if and when she launches a campaign for the presidency. Is this a problem once again for our Commander-in-Chief, our current President Barack Obama, in your view?
The one thing that people tend to completely forget, Austin, is that we're here debating this minor issue, and I don't mean minor in that the death of the four people weren't significant. I'm not saying that. We're debating one small engagement in a larger failed policy. And let me be very clear on this. We wouldn't be even having this conversation if President Obama and Hillary Clinton had not selected the wrong strategy to go into Libya to begin with. I was just in Egypt 2 weeks ago, and I met with their chief of intelligence. And let me tell you, he is upset by the fact that our policies destabilize the region. They're the ones now, Austin, the Egyptians, who are allies, are the ones left with the mess we made. There's all sorts of weapons coming out of Libya and helping fuel their own militias against them because of us destabilizing Gaddafi. So this is one of those things that I often say, always begin with the end in mind. And I said this 2 years ago when this all first started. We had no strategy, we had no policy, and right now, Austin, the larger issue is how badly they misjudged the Libyan situation so that it did not result in democracy. It resulted only in chaos. Some of that chaos may have other secondary unintended consequences, such as destabilizing Egypt even more and seeing other bad things happen in other countries based on the weapons that have gone free from the Libyan regime.
Colonel Tony Shaffer, he's with the Center for Advanced Defense Studies here in the Washington, D.C. area. He's a New York Times best-selling author. He's on the guest line here on Mornings on the Mall at 105.9 FM and AM 630 WMAL. Colonel Shaffer, you and I are Facebook friends. I get to follow you around a little bit on Facebook, and I saw several very intriguing photos that you posted from your recent trip to Egypt. So I kind of kept up with it in photos and periodic comments. I know you were in involved in some very interesting and I would say rather high-level negotiations, or not negotiations, but discussions nonetheless, with military leaders there in that country. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm aware, they still do not have a head of state. They do not have an executive head of their government currently. Is that where it stands right now?
That is essentially accurate. They don't have one who's officially elected. They have an appointed individual who is appointed by General Al-Sisi, the current chief of staff of their army. And I will say this for the audience, and this is one of the reasons we won it. And Bud McFarland, former National Security Director under President Reagan, was the leader of our delegation. And they basically provided us briefings and reassurances that they are on the path to democracy. And let me be, again, clear on this. They didn't try to, I think, pump it up any more than what the reality was. And it's not a safe situation. Cairo is not safe yet. But with that said, they have a plan. They have a new constitution, which I've reviewed. They're having a referendum on it on the 14th and 15th of this month. And then they have plans for both parliamentary elections and presidential elections within the next 6 months. So as much as I think people have portrayed the removal of President Morsi as a coup d'etat, I don't believe for a minute it was. They had no option but to take him out based on the information I have. And I think they're on the path. They're going to try to make a go of democracy. And that's good news for our Israeli allies as well, because as we know, Austin, democracies tend not to attack other democracies. So I think as long as they're moving in a positive democratic direction, as I say, that they want to have a sustainable democracy, not a one-time vote and then done with the votes as they were going to do under President Morsi. I think the trend is good there.
Colonel Tony Shaffer from the Center for Advanced Defense Studies on the guest line here at WMAL. Colonel Shaffer, coming up on a break here, I'm going to ask you to hold on here for just a few seconds. I've got some more questions for you. I do note that indeed the political movement that the Obama administration and President Obama himself endorsed, and I use that term very loosely, but nonetheless supported, President Obama supported the Muslim Brotherhood political movement in that country. That in Egypt, that was the political movement that brought to bear the election of President Morsi. The Muslim Brotherhood, now we are told, has been outlawed. It's been rendered illegal in the country of Egypt. I want to find out from you here in just a moment if you think that reality, rather stark reality, is getting through to members of Congress. We'll continue with Colonel Tony Shaffer in just moments. Colonel Tony Shaffer from the Center for Advanced Defense Studies. He is a New York Times best-selling author, retired from the U.S. Army, of course. His bestseller book, Operation Dark Heart. You can find that at OperationDarkHeart.com. He's on the guest line here at WMAL. Colonel Shaffer, what about this reality we were just hinting at a moment ago? 2 years ago, the political movement that President Obama said would bring stability and peace and diversity and tolerance and everything else to Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood movement, it took hold in the country of Egypt. The people recognized pretty quickly, it would seem to me, that they had another totalitarian regime in the making. And I'm going to use this term very loosely. You have a more nuanced and specific way of describing the removal of President Morsi, but his government was toppled. He was overthrown, at least so it seems to me as a civilian. And now the Muslim Brotherhood political party, in essence, has been outlawed. Are members of Congress recognizing that our U.S. foreign policy and the political movement in Egypt that it embraced and endorsed has been outlawed by Egypt's own people? Is that getting through, do you believe, on Capitol Hill?
Well, part of one of the think tanks I belong to, the London Center for Policy Analysis, is going to be taking this on. I'm going to work with them to declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. And let me be clear on this: the policy you just mentioned, the White House supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, is very much hated. As a matter of fact, most Egyptian people hate the Muslim Brotherhood. And I met with a number of folks who were very devout Muslims who hate the Brotherhood. And let me be clear, the Brotherhood consists of about 800,000 people in a population of 90 million. They're very much a small minority. They were one of the best organized minorities, Austin, when the revolution happened 2 years ago. So with that said, they were able to amalgamate power rapidly, organize, and move forward. And unfortunately for us, and I believe it's a mistake that we're going to be paying for a long time, the Obama administration not only gave them public support, they gave them private support. And some would say that they even funded it. So this has caused a very long-term rift now with the people of Egypt. Let me be very clear. The people of Egypt are very upset with our policies, not with us. We were very well received as private citizens. But what you're saying here has great merit and something that we have to deal with. We have to live with this really bad mistake. And so I think the way we can try to rectify that, as you mentioned, Austin, is we have to convince Congress now to understand the situation. The Muslim Brotherhood has now become a terrorist organization. While I was there, they killed a taxi driver. They pulled him out of his cab and beat him to death and set his cab on fire simply because he honked their horn at them during a protest. So these are not nice guys. These are not people who actually are out to do establish good governance for the people of Egypt. And I think that's the other thing that's going to come out here as the President Morsi's trial comes up. There was no mechanism in their past constitution for removal. They don't have an impeachment process. That's why the Army had to step in the way they did. And they only stepped in, Austin, after a 22 million, now think about this, 22 million person online petition was signed calling for early elections. So that's significant, 22 million. So the fact that they had that level of reticence about his rule, the military, I believe, had no choice but to step in. And now the military is trying to step back out, away as quickly as possible. I don't think they want to run Egypt, despite what the New York Times says about their desire to be in charge. And I think that's what we have to be concerned with, is how do we now rectify that? And I think one of the best ways to rectify that is calling the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, just like the Egyptians have, and I think that's what we're obligated to do.
Mm-hmm. Colonel Tony Shaffer, he's with the Center for Advanced Defense Studies. His New York Times bestseller book, Operation Dark Heart. You can find it at operationdarkheart.com. He'll be appearing on Fox and Friends on the Fox News Channel later this morning. Colonel Shaffer, as always, thanks very much. Happy New Year. Appreciate you being with us.